Hello, it's Tom here. Today we're talking about the Philodendron Squamiferum, sometimes known as the red bristle philodendron. I don't particularly love philodendrons. A lot of people think they're the best houseplant ever, and they're okay. I'm not gonna say they're not, but this one caught my eye. It's just something about the shape of the leaves. It's a little bit different, and I've had it now for a couple of years, and I really like it. Maybe I was wrong about philodendron. This has kind of changed my mind a lot. And since buying this one, I've bought a few more for my collections. So yes, I want to say it's an interesting houseplant. It's unusual, definitely. It's called sometimes, well, it's not called that. Sometimes people know it by the red bristle philodendron name because of the red marks on, not the red marks, the red stems, sorry, they're sort of hairy, a bit bristly. I will zoom in to show you because it looks much better with some zoomed in footage. It's really different. You don't get this on many other plants, and I don't think, there's bound to be some, of course there is, but I don't think many or any philodendrons actually have this sort of hairy redness. It's really interesting. And it just adds a bit of difference to the plant. The leaves are different as well, and what I like about this one is it does not need a moss pole. You don't need to grow up a moss pole to get the adult or the mature looking leaves. There is a difference between the leaf shape. This is, again, I'll show you the footage, but there is a juvenile form, which is it's not really defined. It's not very specific. The leaves are quite dull, essentially. And then as it gets into the mature form, the leaves become much more lobed and more interesting. And I've just said it before on my Instagram and things like that. And I've said it looks like a gingerbread man. That's how it reminds me of, like the Shrek films, with I can't remember his name now, but the little gingerbread man, it looks a little bit like that. And yeah, I think that's kind of cool. But because the mature leaves come very early, this plant isn't particularly tall or big, and yet it's already in its adult form. All that will happen now is future leaves will just get larger and bigger as time progresses. So yeah, it's a quick growing plant. It gets to maturity fast, and what I love more than anything is it's easy. And this video here is going to tell you all about this, and we're going to get stuck in now, and we're going to talk about the care. And by the end of it, you should know how to grow your own plant. So let's get going. Okay, so the light for this plant, the light needs are really straightforward. They're pretty much like any philodendron, and probably I'd say 90% of houseplants generally. They want somewhere bright, but not full sun, ideally, and they don't want to be grown in really low light. So anything medium light levels or above is probably going to be good. And this is testament to that, essentially. This is growing in another west-facing window. It does get a little bit of sun, and sometimes in the height of summer, when it's really intense, there are some burn marks on the leaves. So it's too intense. It doesn't even need that much light. I'm sure some people will tell me they grow theirs in full sun, and cool, but maybe because mine is next to the window itself might be magnifying the light or something and making it more intense. I'm not sure, but I'm going to move it back a little bit this year. I don't want to risk any more damage to the leaf because they are quite beautiful and they take a little while to grow. But yeah, medium light levels, anything above is okay, but just be careful of really intense sunlight. But somewhere between that range will give you the best results. Let's talk watering. Okay, so I've seen conflicting information about this online. Two different schools of thought. One, allow the plant to dry out completely, and the other one is keep it constantly moist. I mean, okay, if that works for you, I'm not going to criticize and say that's not the correct way to do it. But me personally, and what I've had good results with is kind of pretty much, again, like many other houseplants, especially philodendrons. So water them quite well. They are reasonably thirsty, these plants, I would say. And then you kind of wait until they've dried out a little bit, and then you water them again. So sounds very cliched, but wait till the top couple of inches have dried out before you water again. Seems to work well for me. But on occasion, this plant has dried out completely. It has completely dried out, and it's still been okay. But you can tell it's not quite right. The color sort of fades. It becomes a little bit washed out, and there's a bit of a hanging nature. The leaves kind of you can just sort of tell that things aren't quite how they're supposed to be. Look at the soil, and it's dry, so you know it's time to water. But most of the time, what I do and what works for me is, like I say, water it well, let the couple of inches of the top surface of the soil dry out before you water it again. And that seems to work good. So that's what I'm going to recommend. They are tropical houseplants. They want it warm. They want to be almost hot. That's what they're looking for. if you can provide it, they probably want around 27 degrees Celsius, and that's about 80 Fahrenheit. But that is really hot, and I don't imagine most people will be comfortable themselves in that temperature. So a bit low is okay. I think from what I've learned and seen of this plant, it stops growing. So it sort of goes dormant and it doesn't produce as much growth or any growth when you get to around about 18 degrees Celsius, which is 65% Fahrenheit, I think. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself. So after you get lower than that temperature in daytime, as soon as the temperature starts to drop a bit lower than that, then it usually stops growing. And that coincides with, if you're in a hemisphere like myself, which has a distinctive season, four distinctive seasons, and in winter it stops growing because the temperatures are cooler. Okay, let's talk humidity now. So my humidity in my home is around 60%, give or take. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes a bit less, and this plant's fine. It's thriving. There are some people who, especially in the early days, this is a relatively new house plant. It's only been really available for mass sale, I suppose, in the last 2-3 years, I guess. And in the early days, I saw people growing them in glass terrariums in little cabinets and thinking that a high humidity was essential. But I have not found that to be the case in my experience. There are no brown tips or brown edges at 60%, sometimes a bit lower, and it's fine. If your humidity level is really, really low and you notice the usual signs of low humidity issues, such as crispy edges and brown leaves and things like that, then maybe you'll need to think about increasing the humidity around the plant. But otherwise, it's pretty standard, easy going, and hopefully you won't have any problems either. Repotting, if you have a very small plant in a very, very small container, you will probably be looking to repot maybe yearly until it reaches a more mature size. They don't need excessively large pots. This, relatively speaking, is in quite a small container and it's put up a lot of upward growth and it's still going. So it's still reasonably happy. I'm not in a major hurry to repot it, and probably 2 to 3 years possibly. Like I said, I've had this plant about 2 years now. I've repotted it when I first got it and I haven't repotted it since. So I'm probably thinking about maybe doing it later this year, but it's still growing, so there's no urgency. There's no need for me to desperately do that. I'm checking on the potting mix as well, which we're going to cover now. But basically, if it breaks down and starts to look bad, then maybe it's time to repot. Another reason to do it at that time. But you don't have to do it for the plant's health that regularly. So aim for around 2 to 3 years, but do it more if you need to. It's fine. In terms of the potting mix, it is going to be very happy in a kind of an aeroid mix. So it wants it to be quite open and quite airy. Essentially, it doesn't want something really compact. But that said, it will grow in a variety of different potting mixes. You don't have to buy an aeroid mix. It will be okay in normal potting soil or peat-free compost, something like that, because it has an open sort of texture. There's lots of materials in there that keep it kind of open. If you're concerned in any way and you think maybe it's a little bit tight, maybe it's a bit heavy, it absorbs, if it holds a huge amount of water, then you can just amend that by adding in something that's sort of non-porous. And I always say perlite because it's something that springs to mind. But anything along those lines you can use, and it will just keep the mix more open, which is really what they want. So something that's free draining is great, but they will cope with slightly heavier mixes, but don't go over the top. They don't want to be saturated with constantly damp and wet potting mix. So that's sort of the goal of where you want to go. Okay, let's quickly run off some problems you might encounter and what I've experienced in my couple of years of owning this plant. So what do we have? Right, the bristles, they don't stay red. I have been asked that before. My bristles have gone green on the stems. That's normal. They do not stay, red is kind of the vibrant, fresh, new growth. It's very, very red. And then it just gradually starts to fade. It takes a while. It's not like it's instantaneous or over a couple of weeks or whatever, but it does fade. And by about a year, I'd say, yeah, probably about a year, it's gone to a more of a green color, and it's less vibrant. It's a bit dull, to be fair, but it's not a problem. There's nothing you've done wrong. It's just normal part of the plant. Okay, yellow leaves can also be a problem as well. There are 2 types of yellow leaves you can talk about. This one, which is just natural aging or potentially overwatering. I removed this. I should have left it on the plant. I could have showed you better, but I took it off because it was just distracting, so I took it away. But yes, yellow leaf, this has been caused by like old age, they don't last forever, or by too much water. Those are the usual culprits for yellow leaves like this. There's another type of yellow leaf, which I actually have, which I will show you on a photo, probably, and you can see it. So that is most likely caused by, it's not gone, basically it stopped. So it started to go yellow, and I thought it was just gonna come off basically like some, like an older leaf, but it's stopped. And it's been like that now for several weeks. It's just coming after winter here, so I have not been feeding my houseplants. I don't tend to feed them in winter, but I'm pretty sure that the yellowing is caused by underfeeding. As I mentioned earlier, it's in a relatively small container. The fertilizer and the nutrients are probably very scarce at this point. So I haven't been feeding it as well. So I suspect that's why it's gone like this. I'll keep an eye on it, and I think if I feed it, it might start to go back to a normal green. So that could be another option as well, underfeeding. They're relatively hungry plants compared to some other house plants. They do need a bit of feed. The leaves are large, the stems are quite thick, and there's obviously all the bristles. There's a lot going on here. They do need energy. They need the nutrients to grow like that. So it could also be caused by underfeeding. Okay, so sticky sap might be a thing you come across. This can appear on the leaves, on the bristles, on the stems, and it's not very nice. It does look weird. And I first started getting it, I thought that maybe I had a pest infestation, but it turns out that it's actually normal, and some philodendrons do produce this stuff. It's not 100% certain why it does it. Some people think it's designed to attract ants, who will then farm the plant from other insects that might damage it, and in return they will consume the sap. It's like a food for them. The other theory is that the sap is produced by the plant all over, so it will trap hostile insects. So it basically stops them from setting up home and living on the plant. So that's it for this video. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you in the next video.